Hello, this is your Preceptor Development Program. My name is Elena Coucher, and this is Module 1. This is Module 1 Outcomes. You have a set of these outcomes in the Preceptor Notebook that I provided to the unit for you. So let's talk about being a preceptor, mentor, coach. What do all of these terms mean? How do they correlate with one another? Swihart and Figueroa of 2014 describe these terms as interchangeable. They're difficult to separate, and thus the terms function together for the role of the preceptor. If you want to define each of them separately, coaches advise and instruct, often orient the preceptee to the on-the-job activities such as documentation, employee and safety issues, organizational relationships, and how to organize and delegate. Mentors, they're a reflection of the organization, and it's particularly the mission, vision, philosophy, and the culture. They're the encouragers. Mentors also allow learning through one's own failures to help others grow and develop. Preceptors, they're experienced and they're competent staff members. They serve as role models. They incorporate their knowledge, their skills, and abilities into the role. So you can see why these terms are used so interchangeably. They kind of mold together in my book. As a preceptor, you are helping preceptees to infuse into the unit culture. You want to hone their skills. You want to teach essential responsibilities to their role. You want to really look at their critical thinking skills and see what you can do to bump those up. But aren't you also a coach and a mentor? The role of the preceptor, it's going to last about 18 weeks. By the time 18 weeks is done, you're ready to move these babies on out and they can start practicing and working on their own. But that doesn't mean that your coaching and mentoring stops, because usually it lasts for the first year, and sometimes it can last a little beyond. The essential roles of the preceptor were to be servant leaders, role models, socializers, and educators. These are the roles and skills that the preceptor should desire to be modeled for the preceptee. Um, each of these has their own set of essential skills, and they are definitely vital to your leadership. In the servant leader role, this is probably the biggest one right here. These individuals are confident, they're competent, they have a belief that leadership in healthcare first and foremost are acts of service. They have the ability to deal with and accomplish a mission with imperfect people, including themselves. Establishment of a clear sense of purpose and direction, responsible for training, development, and delegation issues, effectively handling criticism, rejection, distractions, and opposition. They're also able to scrutinize and challenge commitment integrity that they might see in others, or even themselves. They have a strong sense of accountability. They're effective at personal and professional renewal. Servant leaders are also considered the transformational leaders. These leaders view their position to be an act of service. They look beyond themselves to aid in preparing the next generation of preceptees. Role models and the socializer role. A role model, a preceptor who role models, leads by example, and they do so with confidence and competence. You expect your role models to be knowledgeable, competent. You want them to be team players, because don't we all want everybody to work together? I mean, it's not fun to go out and play a team sport if there's somebody out on the sidelines who doesn't want to join in with the team. It makes it hard to score goals. Leaders also with strong interpersonal communication skills, they're committed to professional growth and always willing to learn from others. Of course, the socializer role, this is what you do as a preceptor. You help your preceptees to transition to their new work area. You want them to transition to the discipline, to the facility, to the organization, and you also want to help them to transition with their new peers. The educator role. The essential tasks and skills associated with this role are, and I want you to look at this because these steps you can think about right now are pretty much the nursing process. We're assessing. We're looking at their learning needs. We're looking at their readiness to learn. We're looking at planning at learning activities and experiences, implementing the learning plan for the preceptee, aid the preceptee in moving towards improvement in competencies, give accurate, constructive, and developmental feedback, and evaluate the preceptee on their performance. So the preceptor is the educator for the new nurses, right? I mean, that's a given. Then wouldn't it be fair to say that just as these newbies are learning their new role, a preceptor must learn theirs as well? This would be a component of why a preceptor development program, it's just so vitally important right now. It's pretty imperative. We want to really train our preceptees to go out and take care of patients effectively. Um, we need to learn how to educate in a very ever changing difficult clinical setting. And we have so many different types of diverse people coming into the clinical setting. Those are things that we have to think about when we're wanting to educate the preceptee. If we want to retain these nurses and we want to improve patient outcomes, then this why it is essential for the preceptors on BHAC to go through this developmental program. These are some attributes of the preceptor. Swihart and Figueroa have provided these essential attributes that preceptors should develop and hone for excellence in precepting. I personally love the last listed one. It has a sense of humor. I find humor is the best medicine. Been a nurse for over 15 years, and I have laughed with my patients, my preceptees, and my students. With students and preceptees, they tend to relax and they will learn more from you when you can laugh, when you can keep things light when it's appropriate, and not rule with an iron hand. If you're trying to lead them and direct them and educate them, and you've got your thumb down tight on them where it's impossible for them to smile and relax around you, and you're not treating them as if they are a fellow teammate, a fellow nurse. You're not making light of situations that possibly you could do when you're in cleaning up a code brown, for instance. I know some of you are going to be thinking, "What? That is not a sense of humor right there." But there's times that you can have some laughter with your preceptees during some of these situations. You also need to be knowledgeable about policies and procedures, practice standards, unit area and hospital routines, documentation. Documentation is a big one, guys. Y'all have got to be able to give constructive criticism back to your preceptees. You have to be able to document whether if they have achieved a goal or if they have not achieved a goal. And we're going to work through some of this. You want to be able to have great communication skills. You want to be able to have good interpersonal relationships, problem solving, delegation, and priority setting. And some of these things we will be talking about in a couple of other modules, but I needed to hit on this one. There's so much here that you need to look at and think about. Am I taking these, and do I practice these attributes with my preceptee? Preceptor responsibilities, of course, you orient your preceptee to the area they're working. You facilitate, that means you're making sure that the learning experience is what they need. You're making sure that you're helping to bump it up when you find things that they can be a part of. And I know I've worked with many of you on BHEC with my students, and I put my students with, and these are my LPN to RN students, and I put them with you, and you precept them. So I know that for the most part, y'all all do a fantastic job. Y'all do facilitate learning experiences, and so um, I don't want y'all to think that these modules are saying you're not doing these things, because you are. This is just to improve upon the skills that are already there so that we can continue to competently take care of preceptees. And on this slide, I do plan on, and as I am introducing you to this preceptor responsibilities, these are essential. We want to be able to do these. Towards the end of this module, I'll be breaking down the RN Preceptor Manual provided to you by BHEC. So these responsibilities are going to be looked at again. Swihart and Figueroa also list 9 responsibilities of the preceptee. They have responsibilities as well. I'll discuss these here because I feel the preceptee responsibilities are things you should encourage in them. You want your preceptee to be goal-oriented and willing to set development and orientation goals with the preceptor. Be willing to assume responsibility for their own competencies, orientation goals, and outcomes. You help facilitate it. You help get it rocking and rolling, but you want to make sure that your preceptee continues this. So you want to make sure that they have their ball rolling as well. Actively seek challenging assignments and greater responsibility as the comfort and confidence level increases. Be receptive to coaching, feedback, and evaluation. Show initiation and willing to learn. Fulfill all required time commitments agreed upon through the preceptor-preceptee relationship. Demonstrate tact, diplomacy, and sensitivity in working with others. Accept the diversity that comes along with living in our society. Complete all necessary paperwork related to the orientation, and both be willing to accept not all relationships work. Try to resolve any conflict, and we'll talk about conflict later on, but otherwise part ways with the help of administration and do so on good professional terms. Sometimes it just happens. Um, if anybody would like a list of these, please don't hesitate to let me know. Learning styles. We have to hit on learning styles just a little bit. These are some things that I'll tell you this past year as in the course that I was in the springtime. I definitely learned more about learning styles than what I had previously in all the years that I've worked as an educator. So here's something to think about. Do you learn the same way as the person working next to you? I don't. Not everyone learns and receives information the same way. In fact, this is a part of our uniqueness. This is part of us being different. As an educator, a preceptor, you must be acutely aware of different learning styles so that you can effectively lead that preceptee to learning in a clinical setting. Different styles exist and are definitely unique in the adult learner. Uh, Visual, they learn best by seeing. Kinesthetic, they learn best by doing. Auditory, they learn best by talking and hearing. Um, they're going to learn to by reverbalizing information back to their preceptor. And the intellectual, some of these are just natural born critical thinkers and problem solvers. I'm not a natural born one. I wish that I were. Um, but these people, they learn best by thinking through the problem and finding a solution. So what about the adult learner? Here's some principles outlined about the adult learner, and there's many things that I learned about. They're here. This was pretty interesting. Um, adult Adults learn best with organization and good, clear communication. I can relate to that statement right there. Um, just because I work better when I'm organized. If you saw my day planner, you would think that it was probably too busy. But for me, it's an organization. I learn best and I work best that way. And I love to have good, clear communication. Unifying processes means preceptees combine uh, learning situations with their social and physical environments and lived experiences. So preceptors need to incorporate the diversity that exists in individuals, their learning styles, their interests, opinions, and pace instruction with that preceptee. The learning environment needs to be free of judgment. It should be comfortable and relaxed, which is crazy when you think about the clinical setting, I know. As much as possible, though, it needs to be this way. Uh, but advocate also for your preceptee. If you have a preceptee, try to refrain from talking about the argument you had with your significant other to your best bud or coworker, because this is distracting. It kind of just makes the whole learning environment seem a little bit disconjointed. Feedback, we're going to discuss this more in depth in the upcoming modules, but just be aware adult learners do not need criticism. They just don't. They need constructive feedback around and you don't need to do it around any peers because this impedes their learning. Make sure the preceptor finds a quiet, private area for this time of feedback. Also reproducible. That's another aspect of the adult learner. They state in Figueroa and Swihart that preceptors can best reproduce retention and transfer of learning in preceptees by emphasizing principles and general concepts in clinical and work experiences. So you offer frequent practice and performance opportunities and give them feedback through that time of preceptorship. Ethics in precepting. Facilities and nurses alike have professional as well as personal ethics, which are adhered to. Swihart and Figueroa again define what ethics are for the preceptor and how these apply to the preceptor and preceptee relationship. Application of these principles is an essential component for the preceptor because you have to teach ethics and you have to teach policy to the preceptee. We each could define what these ethical principles are to us personally: autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, veracity, justice, paternalism, fidelity, and respect for others. But on the next slides, we're going to look at some examples of what each means for the preceptor role. In autonomy, you provide only the guidance a preceptee requires to be successful and allow for exploration. You allow for trial and error and opportunity to fail forward as they develop their own competencies and knowledge and skills. Beneficence, assist others to understand the legal and ethical standards that apply to the preceptor duties to ensure preceptees are safe, competent, and beneficial with their work-related activities. Non-maleficence, preceptors and preceptees test their decisions and actions by asking, could my decision or actions cause harm in any way? With veracity, you engage. The preceptor must engage in honest, bi-directional feedback and encouragement. You want to support concerns, you want to invite questions, you want to explore false conduct or misrepresentations or behaviors, and comment immediately to correct any deviations from the truth. With justice, all actions and decisions are just, guided by truth, reason, equity, and fairness for all participants. Preceptees, staff and managers, educators, students, families, patients, all within that realm. Paternalism, this was kind of interesting to me. For the preceptor role, it's telling others what is best, often without considering their input. Um, it may be a necessary ethical act to do for the safety of the patient, but we also need to balance it out. Fidelity, preceptors are charged with providing factual, accuracy and reporting information and keep their promises. So if you make an appointment with your preceptee, we're going to meet at 2 o'clock today, and we're going to talk about your goals for tomorrow, or we're going to talk about your goals for next week, and let's evaluate which goals were not met. You need to make sure you follow up with agreed upon tasks as well, and you need to provide timely feedback. Something that you could do, and I didn't even think about putting this in with documentation later on, but within my school, I have to create agendas, and I have to write up minutes whenever I meet with my DMP team. I'm responsible for all of that. So maybe perhaps together at the beginning, the preceptors could create agendas for their preceptee. This is what we're going to talk about in our meeting today. These are the goals that we're going to look at, and these are the goals that we're going to set. And then you write these up as goals and and in the minutes, and you have a documentation there of what you talked about with your preceptee. Respect for others, determine which rules, obligations, and values should direct your choices of both the preceptors and preceptees. And you need to be able to recognize the abilities of others. There's also a standard of practice for preceptors. It's defined by Roth as the standards for the preceptor. These are based from the American Academy for Preceptor Advancement. These standards are also identified by Swihart and Figueroa. We know as nurses that we practice within a scope of practice, a standard that we all follow to practice safely. The following slides, we're going to look at and identify the 6 standards that are set out by the AAPA. In addition, this program draws from the American Nursing Credentialing Center, the ANCC, for forces of magnetism. Baptist itself, I know, is not magnet status. However, the ANCC's forces of magnetism identifies excellence in nursing because it's to secure the future of nursing and promote a culture of patient safety. So that's why I really wanted to set this up in this manner. I wanted you to see the AAPA, and I wanted you to have the ANCC forces of magnetism in here. Standard one is assessment. Preceptors collect data relevant to development needs of the preceptee. Preceptors, in partnership with the stakeholders, analyze organizational culture and climate, and preceptees' initial assessment determine the preceptee's onboarding, their competency, and position-specific learning needs. Standard three, identification of preceptorship goals and outcomes. Preceptors identify specific goals and learning objectives for each preceptoring activity to achieve preceptorship expected outcomes. Standard four, planning the preceptorship. Preceptors collaborate with stakeholders. Stakeholders, you're looking at who the administrative team, any other, and I mean that would be ARN3s, that would be anybody in the administration there, anybody who holds a stake in this preceptee, as appropriate to develop their preceptoring activities that facilitate preceptee successful completion of a competency-based orientation, achievement of learning objectives, and continued competency development. Standard 5, execution and termination of preceptorship. Preceptors implement the planned competency-based orientation, and you can do so using that orientation manual that BHEC has provided, and preceptoring activities that facilitate the preceptee's progressive competency development, achievement of learning objectives, attainment of expected outcomes, and successful transition to an independent practitioner. And in Standard 6, Preceptor provides continuous feedback to the preceptee and stakeholders during the preceptorship. This is why it's so important that we make sure that we communicate in written form what we discuss with our preceptee, how they're doing, and how they're progressing. Let's talk about your orientation manual. As part of the preceptor role, it is essential you lead the preceptee through that orientation manual. I want you to become familiar with it. Identify all areas that you should be helping the preceptee and filling out, and then identify all areas you, the preceptor, should be accessing and documenting on the preceptee. There's pretty much not any part of that preceptor manual that y'all could not use to guide you through the orientation. Much of the goals and action plans pertain to weekly expectations of learning. However, as a preceptor, you are able to identify areas that would benefit the preceptee and patient safety. So we're going to discuss these in the next slides. The preceptee, without a doubt, has an enormous amount of hospital residency tasks to complete. That is no doubt about that. But let's think about it. Let's think about the orientation manual and what it can do for you. And if you haven't really learned it and you haven't really studied it, you need to take the time to do so. And I hope that these help guide you a little bit. Did you have a nursing school instructor that never seemed to have it together? Perhaps he or she was just all over the place and gave the impression of being under prepared for lecture. Did it drive you nuts? That kind of stuff drives me nuts. I'm going to assume that all of you answered yes to this question because no one can learn from that kind of disorganization. Please take the time to go through this. I really want y'all to. It's going to be a requirement that it's done. So section 1, provide the preceptee with the manual before the orientation begins. Check with them. Do they receive it? Send a text message, guys. Get their phone number. Send a text message and introduce yourself. If the orientation manual is given out by administration and you haven't had an opportunity to meet this new preceptee that you're getting, ask for their phone number. Send them a text message. Introduce yourself. Let them know that, hey, my name's Elena. I'm going to be your preceptor. Do you mind if I send you a picture of my smiling face so you can put a face with a name? Ask them also to do these 2 pages before they even come to their first day on the job. Section 2, the BHEC RN program details begins this section that identifies where the preceptee should be in each week of their orientation. I think it's important to note that length of residency, the new graduate registered nurse, it's 18 weeks. You might sometimes find that you need to have some additional time. And if you do, you need to be documenting that this needs to be why it needed to be done, why they need additional time. You cannot just tell administration that my preceptee is not ready to move on. They need additional time. You have to document to validate it. I want you to take a highlighter. I want you to mark off each item completed on the preceptor responsibilities and required documentation forms. Highlighters are your best friend. I just document, that is the only way that I can get through life. If I've got something done, I mark it off. I mark it off with that highlighter, and when I do, I feel accomplished that this part is done and I don't have to look at it again. Precepting requires dedication to patients, preceptees, and the profession. So identify your key responsibilities. Complete the preceptor development workshop. That's professionalism. You surely have done that. I think most of you have. And you're completing this program, which is another form of professionalism. Coordinate your calendar with your orientee to follow the preceptor schedule. Uh, that's communication. Review clinical immersion paperwork, education presentation, and audit for completion. Review the orientee survey and self-assessment. Sign the preceptor and orientee contract and observe the orientee's daily work. The list goes on and on. I really want y'all to start to get yourself educated to this because it will make your life so much easier. Section 2 also contains a clinical progression checklist. Again, this is a valuable way in which to plan your orientation with the preceptee. It allows you to have a tool in front of you to guide the preceptee through orientation, make goals and action plans. These are just tasks. This is not what a preceptoring is, but we're going to talk about not being a task-oriented preceptor and to be one that creates critical thinking exercises. So this is what I want you to identify as a task to be done for a preceptor. Leading the preceptee is not what I want you to identify as a task. Section 3, the contract does need to be signed. It places accountability on you and the preceptee. It also aids in creating a sense of team for the preceptor and preceptee. We're together in this. You need to have this done. It needs to be signed. These are required documents. These go in your preceptee's record. Um, if there are alternate preceptors, you need to make sure that they sign them as well. You need to put that accountability on your preceptee. I will not be here tomorrow. I've had something come up. I've had to change my schedule. So and so will be here in your place. Ensure that you get them to sign this preceptor signature sheet. Section 3, competencies. Guys, this is required documentation. This is expected. This needs to be done. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It goes into your preceptee's record. There's a legend at the bottom of the page that identifies the methods of documentation. Do not just mark these as met, because if you do so, then you have potential risk to patient safety because the preceptee would have not completed that competency identified. Also, next to the competency section, the single most important part of the orientation manual is the weekly progress form. And we're going to talk about this on the next slides because I want you to plan together. I want you to help your preceptee through. So action plans. Example, week 1. This is for progressive care. You set a goal, complete the clinical immersion forms, self-guided tour by end of day 1. Action plan. By end of day 1, the preceptee will have completed the following sections of the orientation book: the self-guided tour, unit socialization, and unit communications. By end of week 1, preceptee will have provided basic care for 2 stable patients. Preceptor, the action plan will be, preceptor will supervise the assessment and documentation of 2 stable patients. So here's where you're looking at your goals. Were they met? Were they not met? But if they weren't met, you have to do so. The goal was met. Preceptee completed the self-guided tour, check marking boxes to ensure each aspect was covered. Needed assistance to locate a few areas, but otherwise successfully completed the goal. Second goal met. Preceptee cared for 2 stable patients, completing assessments and charting an epic. What about on high ops? When we're looking at week 7, when they move here, proficiently give and receive a detailed bedside report on one high ops patient by end of week 7. Action plan. With preceptor supervision, preceptee will deliver a detailed report on a high ops patient. Encourage reciprocating RNs to give a detailed report to preceptee on return to ensure proficiency obtained. If opportunity presents, preceptee will provide an update report to patient physician. Go partially met. Preceptee with preceptor guidance provided a detailed bedside report to the oncoming shift. We'll move the goal forward to next week until proficiency is determined. Preceptee met goal of updating physician, provided physician with an accurate assessment and labs. So these are some of the last sections of the manual, 4, 5, and 6. You have a 7, but we'll look at that on the next slide. Lead your preceptee through these sections. In 4, the clinical immersion paperwork gives them further orientation to 10B and 5B and provides tools to help them understand drips, critical care medications, and so on. It is a great accompaniment to critical thinking skills. Audits is the preceptor's responsibility to assign an audit to the preceptee during orientation. This is turned into the quality manager. Case study forms, you may think that that is ridiculous, and you might have your preceptee who says, this is dumb, I'm not in nursing school any longer. But let me tell you, every book that I read to prepare for this encourages case studies to be done. In 5 and 6, 5 is a section on professionalism. We'll talk a little bit about professionalism in a later module, but you want to encourage this in your preceptee. And in 6, it provides tips on setting boundaries, communication, de-escalation, time management, and team building skills. You see that red? The preceptor will note this section is in red because everything that is in red means that it must be completed and turned into the coordinator. So the evaluation of your orientee, evaluation of the preceptor, program evaluation, and looping evaluation must be done and must be turned in to administration or the coordinator. This is the end of Module 1. There will be an 8-question competency exam for this module. You must score 90% on the exam in order to progress.